Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome to MANnerisms Show. It is the 10th of July, 2014. I am your host, Sackhead Sean. You know me from my Wednesday night show, the Sackheads Radio Show at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 on the East Coast, here on the SHR Media Network. We're breaking our regular format. Normally on the show we talk about all sorts of guy stuff and guns, grills, beer, cars, etc., etc. But, you know, it's one of those things that there is a major event going on right now in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine, and it's one of those things that has not really been covered by mainstream media, in my opinion, as well as it should have been, or it should be. It is an ongoing issue. It's a dangerous issue. We've talked on our show before, and if you listened last night, this isn't anything new, but you know, we've talked on our show a year and a half ago about how if Israel gets drawn into a major conflict and forced into a major conflict, it really destabilizes the Middle East, and it's already a region that is so destabilized already, that the potential for it to be even more destabilized is just frightening, and it scares me on many different levels, and not just because of the Middle East, but our friends and our allies over in Israel, who really this administration is thrown under the bus here, our president and his administration. You know, you had John Kerry 4 or 5 months ago telling Israel that they're risking becoming an apartheid state if they don't come to the table and, you know, work with them in the two-state system. And, you know, you now have the Palestinian government who won't do anything about Hamas, and they won't do anything to stop these militants from firing on Israel. And essentially, their lack of action is pure support. You know, they're quick to denounce the Israelis for defending themselves, but they're not quick to denounce Hamas and trying to say that, you know, separating themselves from it. And that's something that concerns me, too. You know, it's one of those things, and not to dumb it down and make it seem trivial, but, you know, I look at it like a business transaction. If I'm Palestine and I'm the CEO of a company and I keep going to business meetings with somebody that I'm trying to partner with one way or the other, and two of the people on my business team are punching the face of the other company I'm trying to coordinate with, i.e. Israel, I don't know if I'm going to keep bringing them to the meeting. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do everything in my damned power to get rid of them. And that's something that the Palestinian government's not doing. Like I said, the Palestinian spokespeople have this amazing tendency to blame Israel for these atrocious actions, and really, you know, trying to make them into the bad guy. But let's face it, whether you agree or disagree with Gaza or Palestine existing and the two states and the 67 borders, whatever, Hamas is overtly attacking Israel. They're committing, in my opinion, war crimes because, and I agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who gave a statement I'm going to play in a few minutes. They are committing two different acts of war crimes, if you will. One by indiscriminately shooting these rockets into Israel, and civilian populations. They're not targeting military specific. They're not doing anything like that. And number two, by using the children and civilians as shields as they do this inside Palestine and Gaza. So, anyone who's supporting Hamas, I say, is either such an ideologue or is completely ignorant. And when those children on both sides of that border become the victims as a result of their aggression, they can play all the fake pictures they want and they can show all the damage that they want. But the simple fact is they are causing this. They are antagonizing this. Israel has every right, in my opinion, to defend itself. I've said time and again, they live in a place where they're surrounded by everybody who wants to kill them all the time. And I don't mean to make light of that, but, they have neighbors who want to see them, a vast population of the neighbors who want to see them gone off the face of the planet, their religion, their people. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has essentially said that he's not stopping. This isn't going to be over until it's over. You have 40,000 Israeli reservists called up onto the border. There are tanks massed on the border with Gaza right now. Ban Ki-moon said that Gaza is on the knife's edge right now in the Middle East, and it could all go south. And listen, I've been following, and you'll hear it. I do have my phone audio up, my phone ringer up, which I don't normally. I have this app on my phone called Red Alert Israel, and essentially what it is every time a rocket is launched at Israel and the Iron Dome, or the radars pick it up and the Iron Dome is going to be activated, it sends out an alert. And I talked about this on the show last night, but one of the things I've been doing for the last few days is, we here in this country get very complacent in America, and we very, very much have a lot of problems to deal with, but we don't necessarily have the same problems that our friends in Israel deal with. If you're in Chicago, you have to worry about getting shot by some gangbanger. And if you're on the border, we do have our immigration crisis, which, the president is kind of ignoring, which we talked about last night on the Sackhead show. And we do have our problems, but we don't live under this constant risk of attack that somebody may lob a rocket, this M302 long-range rocket, or any of the Fajr 5 Iranian rockets that the Palestinian Hamas has. We don't live under that. And we don't have this, after 9/11, we kind of put our guard up. And here and there we put our guard up. But the people of Israel, and not the military, the people that live there, the people that eat there, the people that are born there, that, if you're a supporter of Hamas and you're listening right now, the people that have the same rights that you say you have to not be disturbed, they're going through their life every day, and then all of a sudden the air raid sirens go off. And when the air raid siren goes off, these people have to run for cover, and they're just normal civilians. And 10, 15 minutes, or until they get the all clear, however long that must be. So I downloaded this app to try to put myself in the mindset of what the people in Israel are going through right now. And it's gone off. I can't even begin to tell you how many times. A couple hundred times already. And I only downloaded it 48 hours ago. And I'm looking at the log. The last one just came through just before we went live on the air. About 3 minutes before we went live on the air. And that was a rocket attack over Motza Azort and Shahar Hangaev. And I pronounced that wrong. I apologize. I have a big fat tongue. And I'm lucky I can pronounce my own names. My own name, rather. 45 minutes before that, there was a rocket over to Ashdod. Another half an hour before that was another rocket. So, these rockets that the Hamas is using now, these M302 rockets, they have a range of 99 miles. And essentially have the ability now to launch a rocket anywhere within Israel, civilian populations. Their shorter rockets are anywhere from 3 miles to 15 miles. The Fajr 5s are their little rockets. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes where these rockets are coming from, but I just want you to listen for a second. You're going to hear two different things, and I'm going to play them back to back. You're going to hear Ron Prosor, who is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. He's going to talk about the air raids. And then right after that, you're going to hear a clip of the Iron Dome missile defense system in Israel intercepting an incoming rocket and It was over a wedding, and I got this off YouTube. It was posted up on YouTube, but here's the first clip.
seconds. That's how much time you have to run for your life.
כל הקהל להיכנס עכשיו לתוך האולם למרחב מוגן. חבר'ה, יש לנו מעל הראש שלי, כולם להיכנס לאולם, כולם.
מבצע. והנה אנחנו יכולים לראות חשוב. וואי, אני מקווה שאתם מצליחים לראות את השיגורים מהכיפת ברזל שאנחנו נמצאים כאן ממש מאחורינו. אנחנו מנסים לאתר, והנה אני רואה...
So, what you heard was a wedding in that second clip, and there were people celebrating, and they know what's going on. I mean, they know that they're under attack. And then all of a sudden they get the air raid siren. And within a very short time, few seconds if that, an Iron Dome missile is activated, and it goes up. And you can see it if you look in the video. You can see it intercept the rocket, and then the loud explosion. You can hear the people screaming, the children crying, and everything. And they were celebrating there too, because they're very proud of that system. It's what keeps them alive. But it's not impenetrable. It's not this magic button that stops this. It's a very, very sophisticated system. It's a very active system. The radar system that's attached to it is excellent, but it doesn't solve all the problems. And there are rockets, and I haven't seen this on the news, and it's kind of driving me crazy. You're seeing it a little bit today. But there are rockets that are landing, and no Israeli people have been killed by a rocket yet, but there's been injuries and there's been damage. Those rockets are touching down, and they're touching down in Tel Aviv, and all over Israel, where the civilian populations are. And the Israelis have essentially, for the last 3 or 4 days, been living in bomb shelters. They're driving down the street, the siren goes off, the alert goes off, they stop their car wherever they are, they run to the nearest building. And that's something, too, that when I watch those videos of everybody running into a fortified building, if you will, or any building they can find, really, just to get out from into the open air where it's the most dangerous. One of the things, too, that I always respect about the Israeli people is how dedicated to each other they are. And I'm sure they have their differences just like any other country, and their people don't always get along. But in the time of true need, they run into these buildings, and the store owners and the building owners, they just open the doors, and there's no concern of, oh God, if I let this guy in, he's going to steal a Twinkie or something like that. They all run in together, and they wait it out together, because that's how they live. It is second nature to them. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to say, but it is very second nature to them to live under this constant risk of attack. And I think that's something that we in this nation, and a lot of nations all around the world, take for granted. And there are other countries that have to deal with this as well, but Israel has been dealing with it pretty much nonstop for the last 25, 30 years. I mean, they've always had issues. There was the wars in the 70s and the war with Lebanon. They've had issues that they've had to fight with, but this is their day-to-day life. This is when they're not, quote-unquote, in a war, when their troops aren't actively defending their land or going after terrorists or extremists. So, keep that in mind if you're an American or if you're a European and you live in a relatively safe place. So when you try to understand the Israeli mindset and why Prime Minister Netanyahu makes a statement like this.
Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza are firing rockets on cities throughout the state of Israel, on Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, Beersheba, Sderot, and other cities. No country on earth would remain passive in the face of hundreds of rockets fired on its cities, and Israel is no exception. Today we expanded our operations against Hamas and the other terrorist groups in Gaza. We'll continue to protect our civilians against Hamas attacks on them. Now Hamas, by contrast, is deliberately putting Palestinian civilians into harm's way. It embeds its terrorists in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, apartment buildings throughout the Gaza Strip. Hamas is thus committing a double war crime. It targets Israeli civilians while hiding behind Palestinian civilians. This operation could take time. We're resolved to defend our families and our homes. Today I spoke with several world leaders. I appreciated their expressions of strong support for our right and our duty to defend ourselves. And this is what we'll continue to do.
And, you know, I'd like to see the list of world leaders that have supported him. I know Prime Minister David Cameron over in the UK has said, you know, he staunchly supports. We're sending John Kerry, allegedly, to go talk to them and try to talk to both sides. But it's so amazing, you know, the politics on this is we are, that is our strongest ally. And it's between that and Britain, Great Britain, or the UK, as far as who our strongest allies are. And you know, some people automatically say Canada. I'm not saying Canada's a bad ally. I just don't think they're our strongest as far as standing with us in our time of need and us standing with them during their time of need. I'm not saying anything bad about Canada, so nobody jump on me for that. But, you know, you have Prime Minister David Cameron, who, as I said last night, hasn't always been as strong when it comes to his foreign policy, in my opinion, as his predecessor, Tony Blair. So for him to come out and make such a harsh, hardline statement, I think it's amazing. I applaud him for that. And then we have our president, who essentially sends, there's a Hearts Media, there was a Hearts Media peace conference, and he sends his little lackey over there. You can't even think of the guy's name. Pissed me off so bad. But he essentially turned around and he's like, oh, hey, yeah, you know what, you guys, you, Israel, really need to practice restraint. And then John Kerry said, you know, to see, what did the statement say exactly? Sorry, I got my notes here somewhere. Kerry told reporters that he's been in touch with both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to see whether or not there's some capacity to be able to restore the status quo ante with respect to a ceasefire. In other words, hey, can we get to this come to an end? Okay, that's pretty good. It's a dangerous moment. We're already engaged to try to see if it's not possible to bring an end to the violence. No country can accept rocket fire amid civilians, and we support completely Israel's right to defend itself from these vicious attacks. Now, that's probably one of the most strong statements that I think Kerry's made against anybody about anything, and I'll give him credit where credit is due. However, what does it say to our friends in Israel when our president has barely spoke about this, and he sends his lackey to a Middle East spokesperson to the conference to essentially tell Israel to, hey, watch yourself, don't go too far with this, and then has Kerry make the statement. Why isn't he making the statement? And that really needs to sink in on just how weak. And you know, I would love to say that he's so focused on our Texas border, but he's really not. And I would love to say that he has other things going on, but he doesn't. Outside of fundraising, which seems to be his favorite thing to do when there's a crisis in the Middle East, is just, you know, jump on a plane and go on a trip. So, you know, I wish I could apologize for our government to the Israeli people for being too late to the party, if you will, for showing up and not really giving the support that they should. Yeah, Kerry made a strong statement, but it wasn't harsh enough, you know, in my opinion. So, you know, in the last 24 hours, there's been in the last 4 days, there's been 400-plus rocket attacks on the Israeli population. Israel's responded, hitting about 400 targets inside Gaza. And I want to talk a little bit about what these munitions are that are being thrown around by Gaza and what rockets they're using. So for a long time, they had a very, very short range set of rockets, and I think they were the Iranian-made Fajr 5. And they also had another Iranian rocket that was specifically designed by Iran to be smuggled through tunnels. So essentially, Iran, as much as they, and that was from intelligence gained through a couple different sources, is that Iranians are producing this rocket that can be disassembled easily, put through the tunnels from Egypt or wherever they need to get it in through Palestine, so that Hamas can fire them on Israel. Now, what does that tell you about Iran in all of this? Iran is very much attacking Israel using a proxy of Hamas and Hezbollah to the north, out of Lebanon. So this goes beyond, in my opinion, just supporting an ally, if you will. And we provide munitions to Israel. We provide F-16s and all sorts of stuff. I know they use our Patriot system. If you watched either of the Gulf Wars, when the Iraqis were firing Scuds, or the first one more than anything else, and the Iraqis were firing the Scud is at Tel Aviv, when the Patriot missile really jumped in and helped then. So yeah, we support Israel because they don't use it to randomly murder people. They use it to defend themselves. So, before everyone jumps down my throat about that, yeah, I'm not ignorant to that fact, but we give it to them for a reason. We give it to them because they're forced to defend themselves by the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah. So back to these missiles. They have the M302, which is essentially a Chinese-designed Weishi-2 Chinese missile. It's designed by a group called the Sichuan Aerospace, and it was designed specifically as a medium to long-range rocket. It's got a total range of about 100 miles, as I said earlier. It carries a 475-pound warhead. There was a big shipment of these intercepted by the Israeli Navy back in March, I think. There was a couple hundred of these that were on a boat from Iran, and they stopped in Iraq, and then they were supposed to be going allegedly to Sudan, but they were caught in the Red Sea, and intercepted, and there's pictures all over the place. But this is the long-range one. This is the one the Israelis are really worried about. It does have a little bit of bigger warhead than the Fajr 5 Iranians. It is Chinese-built, Chinese-designed and Syrian-built. A lot of these are being built in Syria. We don't know where they originate before that, per se. I'm guessing Iran. I'm sure there's some Russian components in there, as much as nobody wants to. Oh my goodness, what, the Russians? How? No. The Russians sell to whoever they can. I mean, they're the biggest arms dealer on the face of the planet, and that's all they are, is arms dealers. So, these are just a small amount of the over 10,000 rockets that Hamas is estimated to have in Gaza, in Palestine, to fire on the Israelis. The Israeli citizens. So that's kind of what they, and they have small arms and stuff like that, but that's kind of the big bang for the buck. They have a bunch of little local rockets that are made, and, they get their solid, you get a metal tube, essentially. You put solid booster in the bottom, which can be made from farming chemicals. You put an old landmine or something on the front, and you aim it, and you can weigh the amount of chemicals you use as your solid rocket booster. It's not hard to make those short-range little missiles, and it's something, as we speak, that's a red alert right now over Israel for an incoming rocket attack. So Moatza Azoret is the alleged destination of that incoming rocket. That's live as we speak, 8:24 p.m., I believe, in Israel. So those were their short-range ones, and that's why they had so many. And that's why, they can launch so many. They're not going to launch them all at once, and they have small arms and stuff like that. And, everyone thinks Hamas is like this weird little terrorist group, and I think they think of it like a ragtag team, but they're not. They're very well funded. Essentially, the Palestinian government, if you recognize that, trains them. They tried to make a land assault in Israel. There was 5 or 6 of them last week that tried to make an ocean assault, rather. And they were taken out by Israeli helicopter. If you go to their website, you can see that they're well-trained. They have equipment. So and there's a lot of them. So that's why Israel has called up 40,000 of its reservists, and they're on the border right now with a whole bunch of tanks, because this all may lead to a ground invasion. And that's really not an exaggeration. That's really not a stretch. Israel's kind of sick and tired of taking it on the chin, and I think they're sick and tired of the world not really supporting them as much as they probably should have. We said last night, when you're supporting the likes of the Palestinian government who's supporting Hamas, then it could very well easily say that you are supporting against Israel. And that's something that until the Palestinian people and the Palestinian government comes out against Hamas and completely denounces them and does their best to work with Israel, and I don't care, we can say international community too, to rid their territory, if you will, of these people and start turning them in and getting rid of them so their people stop getting caught and hurt, then I will start to believe that maybe the Palestinians change their approach. But right now they are very much, this is just a branch of the Palestinian government. It's their armed branch. So what are they up against? Well, when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about the Merkava Mark IV tank, which is the Israeli main battle tank. And folks, the last thing you want to do is get into a tank war with the Israelis, because that is their bread and butter. I mean, they have an amazing defense force. They have an amazing air force. They have a good Navy. They have outstanding special forces. One could argue that their enlisted personnel are better trained than probably 99.9% of the military in the world. But this, and you ask, it was a 6-day war, and you ask everyone that was involved in that back in the 70s, the last thing you ever want to do is get into a tank battle with the Israelis, because more often than not, you will lose. It's one of the reasons why nobody has ever outright invaded Israel, because they know that you just can't do it. So we're going to talk about that after the break. We're also going to get a couple more sound clips I want to play. I want to talk a little bit about the American news here on the MANnerisms Show on the SHR Media Network. We're going to be back in, I'm going to go with a long one. We're going to be back in 3.
Here's radio.
Pack news. Pack news.
Radio.
Pack news. Pack news.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's radio.
Now, before I get in trouble, because I know our good friend Ken McClinton, who is in Las Vegas living the high life right now, is in the chat room, and I know I stole my music for my Wednesday night show. Simple fact of the matter is Sacco's just not living up to his end of the deal, Ken, and everyone else who's listening. He's supposed to give me a whole set of music and everything for my Wednesday show, and he just hasn't done it. So, you know, I don't know what else we have to do. We gave him water last night. We've let him out of the cage to stretch his legs. He obviously just isn't really doing his part, and we're going to have to address that at some point. So there is some other local or U.S. news that I want to discuss right now. The first story comes out of Texas, where 6 people were fatally shot in Spring, Texas, by a gunman who forced his way into his sister-in-law's suburban Houston home. Held her children at gunpoint until the parents arrived. Then he opened fire, killing 4 of the children, 2 of the adults. He is in custody as of right now. He surrendered and turned himself in. Horrible story. Absolutely just horrible. The suspect's name is Ronald Lee Haskell. He actually showed up wearing a FedEx driver's shirt. I mean, this guy, you want to talk about a real screwball. And the fact that it shows you what a humongous coward he was, because he surrendered. And, you know, a lot of people may say, oh, well, it ended peacefully, and I agree with that, and I'm glad that no other shots had to get fired for that. But the simple fact of the matter is he's a coward who, you know what, I hope he gets it. I hope he gets his just desserts at some point in life, because, you know, if you're mad at another adult, and I say this all the time, if 2 guys want to take themselves out behind a bar and wail on each other to settle the differences, that's really nobody's problem but those 2 guys. But when you attack an unarmed family and you walk in cold blood and you have a guise of being a delivery driver, it shows what a tremendous monster you are and what a despicable human being, and you really, you're lower than pond scum. So we're going to follow that story and see. I'm sure he's going to declare himself mentally insane and that he didn't know what he was doing and blah, 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 blah. But it's just a tragedy for the folks affected by that. A horrible, horrible incident. In good news, former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin was sentenced to 10 years for bribery and money laundering with FEMA money for the Katrina. You remember him? He was the guy that, you know, was the Democratic sweetheart and everyone loved him, and he was going to go places. Oh, yeah, he was laundering money, and he was taking bribes, and he was a complete scumbag, contrary to what everyone thought he was. So I'm very, very glad that Ray will spend the next 10 years in prison. So good for him. You know, I'm sure that he will be used to the lavish life that he lived off the money that he laundered and the bribes that he took. In a little 5x10 cell, and I really hope he has a roommate that loves to cuddle. I really do, for his sake. You know, through his tough exterior, I think Ray's a cuddler. I really do. So he's going to be able to cuddle, and that's wonderful. Another bit of bad news out of Lowell, Massachusetts is 7 people died in a house fire out of my state. They were up on the 3rd floor of the apartment where the fire started, and they were unable to make it out. So just horrendous that the fire is under investigation. And our president, I think, is fundraising right now, lastly, one more time. He must be, because there's a crisis going on. I don't know where he is, but he came out yesterday to talk about the crisis on the border. You know, threw some hits over at the Congress and the Republicans specifically for not passing his immigration law, saying all this would have been avoided. Ignored the fact that a lot of this is a man-made incident in which, you know, you tell everyone that we're not going to deport anyone and enforce any sort of immigration rules, and this is what happens, unfortunately. And before everyone whines and says, oh, it's all about the children, and I talked last night, of course there are kids there, and of course I feel for the young children who are being dragged there by their parents, essentially unknowingly and against their will, and I don't know what their parents are telling them. But there's also a flow of MS-13 gang members and cartel operatives, et cetera, that are coming over the border with them. And now, because it's so grossly defunded and ignored, and they're so far behind the eight ball, that even a Democratic representative last night from Texas said the president was just behind on this, and I would have to agree with them. The president had the opportunity to go down the border and view it himself, but he was too busy. He had to go play pool or something like that. So, you know, that's your leadership in this country for you, folks, and that's where we are. So, you know, bravo to the president for not being able to make time for a humongous crisis that many people, including Democrats, are calling his Katrina moment, that he had a chance to go down and actually witness in person, and now they're equating it to when President George W. Bush flew over Katrina and didn't land and look at it, and the devastation, and he took all that flack for that. So, you know, it's nice. Every president likes to be remembered for something, and I hope that this is one of the many problems that this president will be remembered for. So I'm trying to get the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton, on the air, because I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Vegas and his show coming up tonight. And then I do want to discuss Israel with him, and I love the exceptional one himself. Ken is outstanding. He is here with us on the SHR Media Network as well as AC Nation, and you can also get him on Pundit Press, 6 p.m. on Pacific, 9 on the East Coast. And you want to talk about amazing interviews. He had a young lady last night out of Florida, Glow, who is just, she was exceptional, and she's running for Congress down there, and she's definitely somebody you need to watch. She just comes, you know, it's the ultimate American dream story. She came from, as she said, the projects, and you know, now she's running for Congress, and she has such a successful family and a wonderful family, and she just seems like an outstanding human being. So, you know, that kind of, to me, that tells you what the American dream's all about. And when people say to you, hey, you know, the American dream, you know, it's not about a fancy car. It's not about having things, if you will. It really is all about having the opportunity to be as successful as you want to be, and nobody stomping on you, getting in your way. And that's something to me that is the most important thing. And that's why we have the freedoms we have in this country, and that's why we are the greatest nation, in my opinion, on the face of the planet. So hopefully the exceptional one would join us, and it's 800-545-5708 is the phone number. So I want to get back to Israel, and I want to get back to what's going on over there. Before we went to break, we were talking about the Israelis and their tank defense. And so their primary tank right now is, as I said, the Merkava Mark IV tank. Here's a little bit about this tank, and it's been around since about 1979, and obviously they've been upgraded as they go. It's a 65-ton tank, 143,000 pounds for those of us who don't know tons. It's got a length of 29 feet, almost 30 feet, a width of almost 25 feet. 12 feet rather. Carries a 4-man crew. Its armored is pretty much classified. They're not going to tell you what's in it, but it's a composite sloped armor, modular design. It's made to deflect as well as absorb the impact. Its main gun's a 120 millimeter MG253 smoothbore gun, capering a fire in one hell of a round, the Lahat ATGM. It's also got 12.7 MG on it, 7.62 machine gun on it, and a 60 millimeter internal mortar. It also fires smoke grenades. 1,500 horsepower on that bad boy, turbocharged diesel engine, and can carry 48 of those large, the 120 millimeter guns. So it can move, and it's got good clearance. It can go up to 40 miles an hour on road, 34 miles an hour off road is what it's spec'd for. So when I tell you that the last thing Gaza wants, on top of the soldiers, on top of the Israeli soldiers, that's one of the things that the Palestinians or Hamas would have to deal with is that tank. On top of the fact that the Israeli Air Force is firing F-15s, they have F-16s, they have some amazing ordinances on top of the Iron Dome. So it tells you that how, they talk about Israel exercising restraint in all this. And to me, Israel has the ability to go in and wipe the floor with them at any given time. And one of the things that Israel does that Hamas does not do is Israel telegraphs, essentially. They send out messages, they send phone calls when able to the buildings and the people that they're going to be striking against when they do their airstrikes, telling them to get out. They're telling them the attack is coming. They're telling them why. Hey, you have a militant that's using the roof of your house to fire rockets at us, or they're using the alley beside your house to fire rockets at us, and we know they're hiding the launchers within your home, and unfortunately, we can't deal with that. So, when they talk about restraint, they talk about Israel. This is something that I think is just horrendously ignored, is how much restraint Israel shows. Israel honestly could probably march in and do some serious damage in a short amount of time, and they don't. And that's because they practiced restraint. So earlier today, and you heard statements from the UN ambassador from Israel, Ron Porser, talking about the air raid siren. But then Ban Ki-moon made a statement last night, and I want to play his statement right now when we talk about the UN.
The new wave of violence that has engulfed Gaza, southern Israel, and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And this is one of the most critical tests the region has faced in recent years. Gaza is on a knife edge. The deteriorating situation is leading to a downward spiral, which could quickly get beyond anyone's control. I firmly condemn the multiple rocket attacks launched from Gaza on Israel. Such attacks are unacceptable and must stop. I also urge the Prime Minister Netanyahu to exercise maximum restraint and to respect international obligations to protect the civilians. I'm deeply concerned about the rising number of civilian lives lost in Gaza.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for this conference on behalf of...
I commended President Abbas for courageously upholding his commitment to security coordination. This is essential to achieving stability on the ground. President Abbas remains the best partner for peace. I shared with both Israeli and Palestinian leaders my condolences and condemnation of the recent attacks on innocent civilians. The killers must be brought to justice. I also encourage leaders on both sides to do their utmost to end all attacks.
So is UN's Ban Ki-moon. And all of this this recent set of volleys, if you will, or this recent attack stems from a triple homicide, a murder, some could argue a war crime, against 3 Israeli teenagers who were hiking, and they were found murdered, they believe, by Hamas militants, each shot 10 times. And then in response, and unfortunately, there was a Palestinian teen that was kidnapped and murdered. The Israelis did arrest 6 people in that. They did not ignore that. It didn't go away. They didn't act like it didn't happen. They didn't celebrate it. They dispensed justice, and they have a very, very fair judicial system in Israel. And the 6 Israelis responsible for that attack are in custody right now. So, and then there was also another video of 2 Israeli soldiers arresting a 16-year-old kid, and some people said they went over the edge. And, you know, the kid who is a cousin of the Palestinian boy that was murdered allegedly was involved in protests earlier, and they attacked some of the Israeli military, and he was found with a knife on him at the time. And one of the things, too, that I try to explain to people on this side of the in this country is we see something like that, and we judge it based on what we do here. And as I said earlier, we live here. We live in a very, very safe state. Even with the gun violence, stuff like that, overall, it's a safe state. And we also judge it by our laws, and our laws are great for our country, but they not be good for Israel. And I, my personal belief, when I saw the video of the two Israeli soldiers, I thought they went too far. I'll be the first one to admit that, but that's not the entire country of Israel. That's the actions of two people. So that's really what got all of this going, this recent set of attacks, this recent volley between the two areas, the country of Israel and then Palestine. And one of the things that Palestine has been doing the last few days is releasing these pictures that are allegedly of their people attacked, the damage on their side, et cetera, and a lot of them are starting to be debunked, either as old pictures, pictures that are actually in Israel. I talked about it last night. Is one of the pictures that Hamas really pushed out was a picture of a young infant, probably 6-7 months, drinking a bottle, covered in blood coming from its own head, being held by a rescue worker trying to say it was one of their own, and somebody read the rescue worker's patch and realized that it was from a municipality inside Israel, that the patch was written in Hebrew, and that child was actually Israeli and not Palestinian. So that's something that a lot of these splinter groups, Hamas, ISIS, we're talking about ISIS, who allegedly got their hands on some low-grade uranium today over in Iraq, which is really weird because, I thought Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction whatsoever, but ISIS apparently found them. The one that we couldn't find when we got in, they just went into a chemical weapons plant and they got 2,200 chemical weapon rockets or missiles, and then now they got their hands on some uranium. So if that doesn't show you how bad things are over in the Middle East, I don't know what does. By the way, anytime that the Democrats want to issue a apology to President Bush about the no chemical weapons and no weapons of mass destruction, I will be happy to forward them. If you want to send it to me, it's Sean@shrmedia.com. I don't know if Debbie Washman Schultz wants to write something. I don't know how they want to do that, but anytime they want to issue that apology, that'd be great. These groups like Hamas do this propaganda attack where they show all these horrific pictures, and because they're so closed and they don't let a lot of people in unless they're complicit in their opinion. So a lot of the pictures that are coming out are recycled, or they're not from Gaza or Palestine. They're from elsewhere, or if they are from Gaza or Palestine, they're either an old picture, or they try to hijack them. So that's one of the many things that they do. They also love to call Israeli news stations. There was a conversation yesterday. I was watching I-24, one of the Israeli news stations, and a Palestinian spokesperson, a female, called and was talking to the news supporter and the news anchor, and the news anchor was really trying to have a conversation. She was trying to be objective, but she asked a couple questions that the Palestinian spokesperson took umbrage with, and she essentially just started yelling at her. And I said, not for nothing, but if you're trying to really get your point across, and I said this before when I was talking about, if you're trying to make peace, you get rid of Hamas. If you're trying to prove that you guys are quote-unquote victims, don't get mad when somebody asks you a question that may be contrary to your opinion. You can argue it, and you can show your point of view and try to do it in a way that's not screaming and yelling at a news reporter on the air and sounding like an idiot. And after I watched that, I said, this is why people have a hard time listening to Palestine and dealing with this, is because this is how their approach is for everything. And unfortunately, like I said earlier in the show, the Israeli people are the ones who have to suffer. It's either give me what I want and give me everything I want all the time, and or I'm going to scream and yell at you, or maybe throw rockets at your head. So, these are all things that you have to worry about with these groups coming out of the Middle East, and especially with Hamas in this situation. And like I said, they're not angels. As much as everyone wants to say that they are angels, they are not in any way, shape, or form angels. So bear that in mind. I'm trying right now, and hopefully this will go through. I'm trying right now to get the exceptional one on the phone. We're having a little bit of, oh, it's ringing. It is ringing. That means I don't need Sacco. I was able to dial out all by my lonesome. And with any luck,
Joe's Bar and Grill.
voice you
How may I help you?
The melodic voice you'll hear on the other side right now is going to be the exceptional one himself. Sir, how are you?
Well, yourself. How you doing, sir?
I am outstanding. I'm worried, and I talked about it earlier in the show. I'm worried about what could happen right now if Israel does get forced into a ground invasion into Gaza, how that would destabilize the whole region even further. When our one ally, and really one of the countries that keeps that region under control as possible just by their presence, they get caught into a ground war, and what that could do to the political and military stability of that region.
The unfortunate thing here is that they are allowing the PLO to remain in that particular region. For me personally, I just believe with all of my heart and soul that it's time to usher the Palestine Liberation Organization out of Israel, and because they have been at each other for over 4 decades now. No peace accord has ever worked out. And it's not going to work out because it's not the intended purposes of the PLO, Hamas, Hezbollah, or any of the other 48 major states of Islam over there. So virtually the only thing that Israel can do is protect itself. In protecting itself, you have to look at not only the public policy issues, you have to look at the geographical issues in terms of borders. You have to take a look at military protection of the state itself. And you have to take a look at whether the U.S. is one's greatest ally at this particular juncture.
Well, I think that's very, very. I'll answer your last question first, or your last comment, your last statement. No, Kerry's statement, and I don't know if you heard it when I read it. If not, I can read it again to you. Let me just find it real quick. Was probably the strongest statement that's been made so far by our administration.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you heard it, but I the thing that bothered me, and I said at the top of the hour on the show, is, you have David Cameron, who comes out and says they're a staunch supporter of Israel's rights to defend himself. The leader of Great Britain, one of the leaders of the free worlds, if you will. And then comes us, who's supposed to be Israel's greatest ally. And our president has been all but silent about it. He sent his lackey, his spokesperson to the Middle East, to the Hearts Peace Conference a couple days ago to warn, if you will, Israel to use restraint. And it was focused mostly on Israel. Don't defend yourself. Keep getting punched in the chin and don't do anything. And then the Secretary of State comes out and makes a fairly strong statement that I am glad he made, but I don't think he is the right person to have made it. But I'm also talking about a president that goes to Texas and refuses to go to the border despite 3 of his Democrats inviting him down because he has some guy that checks it out occasionally, reports directly to him. We all know how well the chain of communication in the White House is, so I don't know if I would rely on that if I were him at this point. But what does that tell you about this White House's view on our friends in Israel?
Well, I don't think they see Israel as a friend. I don't see him, when he sat down the first time with Netanyahu at the White House and then got up and left him at the table, it spoke volumes about how far we have left Israel in our relationship, and also how distant that we have allowed them to be perceived in terms of the rest of the world. That was the hallmark entry to individuals around the world, virtually saying Obama's not going to support Israel. Now, of course, they're going to talk tough. They're going to say that they want both sides to settle down. But from the way that the U.S. is using this, it's as if the Israelis have started this particular war, the Israelis need to end it, when it's all but the other way around. And it's very important, very vital right now that Netanyahu listen to his public. He doesn't want to move forward with aggression. But you know what? If you've done all that you can do and still they fight you, you better darn sure do whatever you can do to protect yourself. And I like the point that you made earlier about Russia on the sidelines, yet actually stimulating some of this particular activity as well. The bottom line is that they see Israel alone, and they are taking advantage of that situation. Well, the other key thing, when the U.S. did not respond with 160,000 troops going back into Iraq and knocking ISIS on its gluteus maximus and destroying it, they took that as a sign of weakness. And the only thing that can be answered in the Middle East is strength. They have to be hit with a nuclear bomb in order for them to understand that we're not going to take it anymore.
Well, you brought up the point about Prime Minister Netanyahu listening to his people, and I think it's one of those things, I think he's trying to play politics, and I think he's also trying to save face in the international community in the sense of he knows that so many, including in this country and our media, will make him out to be a monster if he goes in and just cleans house. And it's almost starting to the American politics is starting to leak in over there, which it used to not. And I have nothing but respect for Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I said before, I think he's probably one of the great statesmen of the world right now. But the people over there, and if you read Twitter, if you read blogs, if you read posts, I have a couple friends of mine who have Israeli descent, and I've talked to them. They're done. They're sick of running for their lives every 15 minutes. They're sick of living in bomb shelters. They're sick of being attacked. They're sick, and they don't even really care on how it ends, and that's, I think, something that is starting to come out more and more. Sadly, Hamas has almost worn a lot of them down where they're like, fine, we'll do a two-state system. Just leave us alone. Stop trying to kill us. I want to be able to bring my kid to the park and not worry about it. And I think that's something, if you look at Bibi Netanyahu's history, when push comes to shove, he's going to push back twice. And he's not a man who is afraid to protect his people. He's not a man who's afraid to necessarily look bad in the international community if it's the right thing for his country. Something our president may want to take a page out of his book on. So I think when push comes to shove, you're going to see tanks rolling into Gaza here very shortly, I think.
Personally, I would prefer them to roll into Lebanon. But that's just my personal opinion. I really think
back to 1982.
Yeah. Listen. If he took care of Gaza, or if Israel took care of Gaza, there would still be Lebanon. There would still be Syria. There would still be Iraq and Iran. They're going to have to do a virtual clean sweep of their enemies. Boy, they need to read the Old Testament and get them out of their land. Because, quite frankly, the PLO is still the player, still the situation chief over there. The PLO knows that the Obama administration supports them, and even the Pope supports them in certain cases. So the bottom line is, your enemy is the PLO. Your enemy is anyone who's inside your borders and not agreeing to live in accord with the republic, with the nation. If you can't live here, you got to go. Wow, that would have been a very big statement to make last night by the president. Hey.
Well, and it's so funny too, because In this country, if there was insurrection, they would be charged with treason, and they would be put down.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at how our administration looks at political groups that are legitimate political groups in this country, and I'm speaking, of course, of the Tea Party and calling them extremists and these Tea Party terrorists that have been, I think Harry Reid said, and can you imagine if there was a group of us that try to succeed, and I'm not calling for this, I'm not calling for insurrection, but in this country, if you imagine that sort of activity that happened here, it'd be over in a minute.
Yeah.
But yet we still expect them in Israel to live by a different standard, and it's even more the hypocrisy of this administration and this government.
You're absolutely right. And what I'm really worried about is what would the American president do if his citizens stopped a bus full of people and there was some form of violence? Would those who attempted to protect the republic actually be placed in prison for just basically doing what they're constitutionally rightfully doing? Israel has a situation on its hands that it will never get rid of as long as there is a progressive link between itself and the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Progressives here want Israel to bow and become the 1947 Israel.
Right. And that's the problem. That's a huge problem. And so, let's get to today and what's going on there today. How do you see the outcome if Israel rolls in on tanks? Do you see, and I worry about ISIS along with the PLO, because we could talk Shiite and Sunni and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, they very much play by the rules of the enemy is my friend. And do you see, should tanks roll into Gaza and Palestine, do you see those groups starting to come out? Do you see maybe the Iranians who've done nothing but support the PLO and Hamas and Hezbollah start to come to their defense? Because Iran, and I'll tell you, I'm worried a little bit. Iran jump into the defense of Iraq all of a sudden and starting to find a way to stretch their troops outside their borders and their aircraft outside the border. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think they're looking for an even closer launcher base for Israel. And that's their whole play in Iraq, is to be able to get a foothold in there. And I know it's not that far, but at the end of the day, it's that much further. And expand their control. Do you see other countries starting to come to the defense of Palestine? Because let's face it, Palestine's a member of the UN now.
No, they're not. They don't want the PLO. You can look around they've had over 70 years to indoctrinate PLO back into their state. And I mean, the King of Jordan made it very, very plain in an interview once that he never wanted any member from the Palestinian Liberation Organization to even come into his country, less than make citizenship. So they know exactly what they got there. They got radicals and they got their antithesis to the PLO should be the same antithesis Obama has towards the Tea Party. And by any means necessary, they need to eliminate and ask them to leave. And the problem that you mentioned earlier is the optics. Israel has tried all of these years to submit to a progressive image of the way Israel is intended to be. Israel is supposed to be a place where both Palestinians, that both the rebels and radicals, as well the Jews can live peacefully. They have to let go of that imagery and go back to their pre-1972 identity, in which they would not give up land for the sake of peace. And quite frankly, to the world that, you know what, I would never ask you to give up a portion of your land to your enemy, and I hope that you will not ask us to do the very same thing. Unless they start seeing the PLO for the enemy that it is and start reacting to them, despite what the world says, they will continually be in that situation. And I also noticed that Hamas were shooting towards their nuclear facilities. Mm-hmm. And I think people need to understand, you don't do that by accident. This has been a well-coordinated effort by a lot of individual groups in this particular process. And they know for a fact that Israel could clean the clock of everybody in the Middle East right now if it wanted to. They don't have any power to sustain any attack from Israel, which is why I'm not really worried about Israel being victorious. They definitely would be. But the problem is they're trying to tell the world and justify the world. They're images that you got to see when you're not really looking for them, that it's unfair that Israel has a nuclear weaponry and we don't. That's the imagery that they're trying to present to the world. And if people catch on to that, that they're going to ask Israel to do the same thing the U.S. did, and that's to pare down their nuclear weapons.
Yeah, God forbid somebody has the right to defend themselves. And you know what's funny is Israel, Israel, quite frankly, built their nukes to defend themselves, but more of a deterrent during the Cold War. I mean, that was really when they started to ramp it up, because they're, like you said, they're not really worried about Iran and this unless Iran gets a nuke. They're not going to nuke Hamas. They're not going to nuke Lebanon. It's too close to home. Too much damage at home. It wouldn't happen that way. But the theory that you said is just ask them to remove it because it's unfair. Will come to the table, and I fear that they will try to make some sort of coordinated attack, and I also feel that as much as I hate to say it, PLO has a tendency to pull cards out of their sleeves. And it'll be interesting to see if a more advanced weapon doesn't pop up. And we've been shocked by the M302, but you start looking at all the enemies that Syria has in the area. You mentioned the few stable, if you will, countries right around there that support Israel, or at least are an ally, if you will. You talk about the Turks are a very stable nation, and they are. Last I checked, they supported Israel. Jordan, actually, who's also one of the great allies, and that's a country that we forget about over here quite a bit. Jordan's very on board now. I mean, it's changed a lot over the last 40 years. But the Jordanian king very much supports, I think, Israel because they know that if Israel falls, Jordan's next.
Yeah, exactly.
So they very much support the way Israel operates, and they do have a good relationship. But you look at everyone else in that region, and they want Israel blown off the face of the planet. So, those tunnels and the systems they have to move stuff in, and we don't know if one of those a more strategic missile has shown up or something with guidance systems starts showing up. And that scares me. Because, Israel is such a small nation, has the pockets of population are very dense. And if somebody were to make an attempt at that nuclear facility and they arrested 3 guys, say, in a car bomb that wasn't far from their facility, if they really start making a go at that, and it's always one of those things, I say it in my life, and not for these reasons, but I'd rather be lucky than good. If they're lucky once, all hell could break loose.
Definitely. But even in the case of the nuclear situation, which I really think that's really what they're pointing to in all of this, it's not about those 3 teenagers. Teenagers have died before. It's not about life that they're concerned about. I'm not talking about the Israelis. I'm talking about the those started Hamas and so on. They're not worried about that kind of stuff. They're worried
they use
about
their children as shields all the time.
Exactly. I mean, what's a bus of kids? Come on. We do that at lunch. But the whole idea of imagery right now, the president going to the border would have been the wrong imagery for him, because then he would have seen for himself, and the world would have seen him as the domestically weak one who was responsible for this in his policies. Likewise, it's the imagery of Israel being so superior to all of the Islamists. I call it the cult of the Mohammeds. In that
Mohammedists.
Mohammedists. I can see the T-shirt now. Peace coexistence with Muhammad. So black and red, mostly red.
Mostly
so
red.
The whole idea of Israel at this particular juncture, being able to stabilize through peace efforts, is a fault move. It's not going to happen. They've done all that they can do, and quite frankly, Obama has sent the signal that they've done all that they're going to do on this particular matter, which is why everyone's looking at the last minute. And I just can't understand why those in our mainstream media don't see that picture.
At all. At all.
You know, exactly. You know, it is Israel saying to the rest of the world, and especially to us, we will have to use tanks because you won't do what you're supposed to do and support us. And it should have been supported with strong words coming from the President of the United States. There should not have been a question of whether they need to ramp down their response. They're trying to protect their country. They're trying to protect their lives. They need a president who's going to come out and say, you know what? We need to do what's best for Israel. Until they hear that, everybody's going to be taking shots at them, and they're going to be asked eventually, sometime during the course of this year, to do something about this nuclear armament and their strength. I think we're getting to a point now where Israel's going to have to decide whether it can survive on its own. And I think we've reached that danger point.
And that's truly sad, and it's sad for the people of Israel. It's sad for the government of Israel. You know, I said before and I said again, we have such a hand in why they live where they are, and why, and everything around it being so deteriorated because of things that we've dealt with over the years that we should not have dealt with. You know, and a lot of other countries are going to start doing the same thing. You know, the only thing that, sadly, when France is doing more to help our number one ally than we are, that's a problem, and it's a very telling problem, and it's something that we need to move beyond. And you know, I know we keep hoping at some point that it's going to happen, but this president's never going to stone up, and he's never going to come out and do what needs to be right. And I only hope Israel can hold it together until maybe we can get somebody that actually appreciates them as a leader. And you know, our thoughts and prayers. It's a ridiculously fluid situation. I got to wrap up the show. We went overtime, but our thoughts and prayers are with the good people over at Israel. And you know, even if, as I said earlier, even if our president won't say it, we do support you as a people here and as a nation.
Exactly. And I pray also that Israel, those who are in power and those who are attempting themselves, the progressive Israelis, to bring about this utopic peace between themselves in the Middle East, finally submit to the thought and intention of why they became a nation in the first place back in 1948, and that they would get the boundaries, and that they must first respect their own boundaries before the rest of the world will respect them.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Ken, I appreciate you joining me for this segment of the show. Now, let's talk fun stuff. Tell everyone where you are and what you're doing.
I am at a penthouse at the Jockey Club Suite in Las Vegas, Nevada, for business purposes only.
Now, last night during your show, and I didn't get a chance to ask you, did I get you in trouble?
No.
With Mrs. Ken?
No,
okay, good.
No, my wife is very supportive, and I wish my wife would listen to here, because this is a big room. Several rooms that I'm in. And it's really lonely not having her here.
Was that room service I just heard? I can tell how upset you are.
Woe is me. I have to write you a love song, honey. I miss you. as I stretch myself out in the jacuzzi tub, I'm really missing you.
Like I said, Mrs. Ken, if you need me to go check on him, just let me know. It's not too far of a drive for me. And tell everyone about Freedom Fest.
Well, Freedom Fest is going along well. It's a gathering of libertarians, and I'm not a libertarian. I'm a conservative, and I've gotten a few kisses from walking around the convention floor. But nonetheless, it's the gathering of, they say, great minds. I say libertarians, and they talk about the issues, just like CPAC. So this is their CPAC. And so it's a great experience. A great number of individuals of prominence are here. And let me just get that little thing, because I do that little plug there for them. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, put the bottle down. Put the bottle down. It's only 116.
It's sad when you walk in your room and you hear cans and bottles.
You're like, how did they get stacked up behind the door after I left? That's weird. That must have went out through the slider on the patio.
Oh, wow. But they have some very prominent people here. And, in fact, Newt Anderson, David Boaz, Radley Boko. It's a number of the great ones here. And they're doing a great number. Grover Norquist is here.
Wow.
Chris Casey, my friend, from Rimrock Wealth Management, and I had breakfast with him. He's a great guy. He's just a wonderful man.
I've actually talked to Chris a few times. He's a brilliant man, too.
Yeah, he is. A very posh restaurant this morning. I was suffering, man. I really was suffering.
He must have been paying.
Yes, he was.
Nothing but the best for you, buddy.
That's right. You know, if I was paying, it would have been that Burger King down the street with the Proud Mary burger.
Oh, yeah.
But he's doing something. So it's a lot of great guys here, and they're presenting their opinions on public policy.
Oh, that's great. And if you're in the greater Las Vegas area, I think there are still some tickets available. If you want to check out Freedom Fest, and go and see if you can find the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton, and give him a high five for us and a hug for us, because we love Ken so much. We are truly honored when he joins us on our Wednesday night show, and I'm honored again today. And we're honored to have him here on the SHR Media Network every Monday through Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 on the East Coast. What's coming up for the show tonight, bud?
Judge Burt Richardson is running for Texas Criminal Appeals Court. It is the life and death court, I would say, of Texas. And we're going to talk tonight about his campaign, about the Constitution, its role in the decisions that he makes. And in addition to that, we're going to broach a little bit about immigration. We're going to ask about his decisions and how we should be looking at constitutionally the migration or invasion of individuals from South and Central America.
That sounds like a great show. And again, on AC Nation Pundit Press and here on the SHR Media Network, 6 p.m. on the Pacific, 9 on the East Coast. Hey, Ken, you got to get to Hugo Cellars for me. And that place holds a special place in my heart, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
If you order martini, not only do they fill you glass, but they give you a sidecar, a shaker that's almost all the way full after the fact for the single price of the one martini. I'm just saying. So that gets the Sackhead Sean seal of approval right there.
Honey, I don't know how that photograph was taken with that woman wearing that sexual conservative hat, Dave, but the martini.
It's right there. I'm telling you, though, I think I've been to Vegas a bunch of times, eaten in a lot of places, a lot of amazing places in Las Vegas to eat. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. But Hugo Cellars, I think, is the gem, the hidden gem of Las Vegas. It is like stepping back in time to the old 70s swanky steakhouses, like when you were actually treated like you spent the money, but you were treated like you spent the money. Unlike now where, a lot of wait staff in places just kind of snub their nose at you. Prime Rib is unbelievable. The service is great. They actually make your salad table side. Like the first time I went there, I never wanted to leave until the police came, and then I've because it was that good. So,
but can I say something about Las Vegas?
Yes.
Because I think the women of Washington are a whole lot more beautiful. But forgive me for saying that. I can only say on your show. So everyone tunes into my show. They're all beautiful.
Right, of course. As a matter of fact, you've said that off the air a bunch of times.
But the women look so sad at the gaming tables. They look just like they got chains locked onto their, like Sacco. They look so sad.
I'll tell you, a funny little story about Vegas. A couple years ago, a couple buddies of mine were down there for a birthday, and we were in, I want to say we were in the bottom of the Venetian, and there's a couple bars down there. We were having a drink, and this girl came out of the blue and started talking to my buddy, and he was being nice, and, we're all married guys, and he didn't make any bones about that, but he was being nice and engaging her in conversation, and she was quite beautiful, but, have you ever bumped into somebody where you look and you're like, there's more to this story?
Yeah.
All of us immediately thought that, with the exception of him, because he was so close that he wasn't paying attention. So as they were talking for a little bit, and this is, of course, we're a couple beers deep, so I start prodding the issue a little bit. She went to go to the bathroom. I'm like, what's her deal? And he's like, oh, she's just being nice. She works around here. And but like there was no solid answers. So then as she's leaving, she hands him a business card, and her name was, I don't remember what. But on the business card was a phone number, and the only thing it said was trumpet cleaning. And he looked at me, and he was like, why would she have a business card for Trump? Oh. And that was one of my favorite stories, because we all knew there was something wrong with her except for him. And he was, just being friendly. He's a really friendly, outgoing guy. And I said, we're only there we just got to Vegas. I said, we're in Vegas a few hours, and you get a hooker with a business card. How nice is that?
Hey, that's upscale.
That's not like those D.C. hookers.
No. The D.C. hookers are slightly different. They virtually just go straight to the Capitol, man. They don't deal with other people.
Actually, a lot of them are elected already into the Capitol.
One leg or two.
So I joke about Vegas, but Vegas is one of my favorite places to visit. It's such a live and vibrant city, and actually the people there are very, very nice. It's one of those things. When you walk down the street, the only weird part is all the people trying to hand you the strip joint cards. Have you experienced that yet?
Yeah.
Isn't that the most bizarre thing? And I don't know about you. I collected about 100 of them. But
I'm just wondering, what is it about me that made you think that I would be interested in going, especially, in Vegas, you've been here so many times, most of the women have very little on to begin with.
Right. Oh, I know.
Why I need to go to a strip club.
All I have to do is go by any of the hotel pools and have a drink, and you're getting it for free. And a lot of times, it's a lot more entertaining.
Oh, my God. Hi, my name's Larry, and I want to do my dance for you.
Well, I want to get the hell out of here. You scare me. Two of my favorite places is I love the water show in front of the Bellagio in Vegas, and I'm always impressed by that. And I know when it first started, it was new technology, and now it's old. But I could sit there and watch that about 25 times because you can drink on the street there, and so I can do that and enjoy it.
No, sir, I'm watching a film.
I just start reciting lines from Ocean's 11 to the people standing around me and see what they say. And my other favorite place is inside the Bellagio. I get a lot of favorites, but inside the Bellagio, they have a garden, and I'm not a garden person at all. Like, I'm not a plant and flower guy. I can mow the lawn, I can water the lawn, but that's really about the extent of it. But to me, that inside garden area is one of the coolest. Like, that's how you know you're in Vegas, when you're like, oh, you can have an entire forest inside a building because you're in Las Vegas, and you can do that. And to me, I just think that really sums up like how cool Vegas is, that they're like, yeah, all these plants would die outside, so we're just going to grow them all inside.
Kind of like reefer. Anyway. Oh, my goodness.
I expect a report. You're going to be home Monday, I think, right?
I will be home Monday. Actually, I'll be home Sunday. I'm leaving Saturday morning. And I'm going to Milwaukee. Gee.
Milwaukee.
Oh, the land of teachers' unions.
Yes, have fun with that.
Exactly. At least I'll be sober, right? I can't. No, honey, with the law, we had to drink.
Yeah, it's Milwaukee. You know, Schlitz is mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I expect a report on Monday on your favorite places to eat in Las Vegas.
Oh, there was an Italian restaurant last night I liked, but this morning the Mon Ami Gavé, that was just, oh wow, that was a very nice breakfast. So I not that I'm struggling over food and leisure events and things of that nature. I am hard pressed to put in the best of urban conservative talk for people while I'm here in Vegas.
And you do that every single night you're on the air, no matter what. And I don't care how many of those little Texas flasks you go through today before the show tonight.
I love this flask. I like it. I had to have it as soon as I went to the airport. I thought, don't mess with that. And when you send me that stuff that I get every night for my show, I'm going to put it in this flask, and I will definitely make.
I call that politics juice.
What? We don't agree? Another drink.
Well, you know, I hope you have a wonderful time. I know you will. I hope you make a lot of great connections. But more importantly, I know you're bringing the best in urban conservative talk to Las Vegas, and I hope the people there can appreciate the gem that they have for a short amount of time. And I really do mean that. And we love you, and you know that. And I hope you enjoy your stay, and we can't wait to talk to you later.
Well, I love y'all, too. Y'all are just the greatest people. Everybody needs to tune into SHR Media because it's just great stuff, man. It really is.
Hey, you know, everything from we can talk about everything from wars to stripper in one segment, and that tells you the kind of show that we run here.
We are diverse. We're cultured.
We should be the models for all the diversity that they want.
But you know what? Friday night, I am actually going to see if it's true that the more policy drink you drink, the prettier the women get. I'm just going to put that to the test. I'll give you the scientific. No, just kidding.
You've been Ustreaming, so why don't you record some of that so we can watch it later?
Oh, especially the hi, Larry. I want to do my dance for you.
Well, Mr. Exceptional himself, the exceptional conservative Ken McClinton. Hey, we got to wrap up the show, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care.
God bless. Be safe.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we will see you next Wednesday at 12 p.m. I'm sorry, Wednesday night will be 8 p.m. Pacific here on the SHR Media Network with the Sackheads Radio Show. And I'll be back next Thursday at 12 noon in Pacific here on the MANnerisms Show. Thank you so much to Ken McClinton to join us. Check out 4 p.m. coming up today, the Evan Miller Report here on SHR Media, followed immediately by the Exceptional Conservative Show. For the MANnerisms Show, I am Sackhead Sean. I will talk to you next week.